Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. I am beyond tired of Canadians fundamentally misunderstanding how treaties with the natives work. Now, the talented Tanya Tagak on Twitter put out a tweet saying, I wish more Canadians actually knew how treaties worked. So I took it upon myself to try my best to do this, even though I don't know everything. So let's keep that in mind moving forward. So right off the bat, when you hear the word treaty, what comes to mind? Something like a peace treaty, right? Between nations. And we refer to indigenous representatives and their governments as First Nations. So right there, that should show people that it's not just the government giving out handouts to, say, Canadian citizens. It's rather an agreement between two sovereign and independent parties that have agreed to have some form of agreement. This is why each of the treaties are a little different, because they also came in different times. Some of our treaties are old as hell. They're from the 1700s. Others have been happening since as recently as 2005. Now, a lot of Canadians seem to have this idea that our tax dollars pay for natives. It's free money, and natives get to live tax-free. Come on, they have a really good deal. The true reality is that natives are actually subsidizing the economy. Now, I'll get to the root of that in a bit, but I first want to talk about the fact that the tax dollars thing is not how it's working. Instead of seeing it as our tax dollars pay for, them and their lands and just gives them free money, think of it like this. The money that the federal government gives to them is money owed for the privilege of settling this land. That's where a lot of this comes from. And the reason why natives have to pay less tax is because reserves are on federal land and have been set aside for indigenous use. And since they are considered a people who have signed a treaty with Canada, they're not a part of Canada, therefore certain taxes don't apply. To an extent, I'm oversimplifying a lot. There's a lot of legalism and history behind here, but we don't have time for that. So that right there is the reason why, they don't have to pay taxes, because it was an agreement signed by Canadian governments and previous British and French governments in the colonial period. So no, it's not our tax dollars paying for it, nor are they living tax-free because certain taxes still apply. But the agreement that the federal government signed with their people says that that is a privilege that they have. So instead of being mad at the natives, be mad at your government and leave the natives and their land alone. And now I want to talk about the fact that we continue to exploit native land. For example, a lot of Canada's economy is based on resource extraction. I talked about this in my Bothered by Made in Canada video. Now, a lot of our industry comes from mining, lumber, and fisheries and things like this. That obviously includes a shit ton of native land, which a lot of them haven't signed treaties with because they never surrendered the land in the first place. And this is why new modern treaties or comprehensive land title agreements continue to be made to this day. And it's also part of why Nunavut exists as a territory. Now, when you realize that we haven't signed treaties with these people while we're still exploiting their land without paying them due title for the land, like how we would be really mad if we tried to sell land to someone and they instead just kind of took it or just tore down a house and started building on it without paying you the property dues that you had a right to as guaranteed by the Constitution. That'd piss you off, right? And that's why a lot of these roadblocks and things like the Wet'suwet'en protests and the Atawapiskat protests, this is why they happen, because governments and corporations are letting themselves run wild on indigenous land that has not been ceded, nor have they adequately been compensated for. It should not be hard to comprehend, and yet because we're so racist against natives, it apparently is. So please keep in mind that if we actually paid the natives what we owed, we'd be even more in debt to them, and they would actually have a lot nicer reserves. Imagine if the De Beers Company that makes billions off of the diamond mines in the Northern Territories, imagine if they adequately compensated the natives for the use of their land the way, we make them compensate us in Canada. If they did the same, then these ideas of having to live in terrible, broken down, drafty and moldy bungalows, and having boil water advisories, and having to deal with, all your power coming from a diesel generator. These problems would be solved if we actually funded and treated natives the way our treaties are supposed to, which is why we keep violating them, and it's a big problem. But imagine if we actually, held up our end of the deal and acknowledged their land and the price for it and let them have a say in the governance and maintenance and selling of the land, and they got some of that money back to feed into their own communities, then we wouldn't have a lot of these problems we claim we have. We are the architects of our own problems. By not adhering to the treaties that we agree to uphold, we're causing our own problems and causing conflict with the native population. The fact that we have boil water advisories in the country with the most fresh water on the planet should embarrass every Canadian. And what's also embarrassing, to me anyway, is that we still seem to think that natives don't pay taxes when they do, and that they get free money from the government when they don't. So I'm hoping that people will share this around so that other people can finally stop being so ignorant about the situation in Canada and the situation with the natives, and realize that if we actually did our part and paid our dues and respected our constitutional and treaty obligations to these people, then their communities would be better, and it would ultimately solve a lot of shame, embarrassment, and trouble for both sides involved. But the fact that we continue to do this, thinking that the situation is going to change if we just ignore it long enough, that is what's bothering me today.